Kia ora.
Kia ora, Dan.
Kia ora, Cheryl. Kia ora, John.
Hi, Cheryl. It's Tanya.
And Lynn.
Hi,
Together.
Tanya and Lynn.
Hello.
Who else have we got today? Who's joining us? If you feel comfortable to, would love to see your wonderful faces if you can put on your camera, even if it's just for a moment. I can see Kyle has arrived.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Kyle.
Hi, I'm Brenda. Hi.
Hey, Brenda. Awesome. I always love...
Hello.
Hey, Monique. I love your hat, Monique. Are you in somewhere sunny and warm?
No, I'm just having a bad headache.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, perfect day for a hat. Awesome. We'll just give it another half a minute for people to come in and get themselves set up. Again, if you have the opportunity to flick on your camera, no pressure, but it also, in this crazy time that we're in at the moment, it's wonderful to be able to connect, and it can be as simple as just being able to see this beautiful community of people. So if you feel comfortable to flick on your camera, give us a wave, and we'll kick off with things very shortly.
I love your Zoom background, Cheryl. Post-it notes on one side and skateboard and snowboard on the other.
This is it, right, Dan? Balance in life. My challenge at the moment is I'm not allowed to snowboard.
Wow.
So I just longingly look at my snowboard and remember the days of being able to do that. But yeah, life balance going on. Awesome. All right, we are going to kick off very shortly. I'm just letting everyone in. Oh, Jenny, kia ora from Melbourne. Awesome. We've gone outside of Aotearoa. Anyone else tuning in from outside of Aotearoa?
John,
Australia Faro. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, it is excellent. Oh, Annette's got her hat on today as well. Brilliant. We're going to kick into things. It is Friday afternoon. Want to be respectful of time and want to get straight into the meaty conversation that we've got planned for today, which is super exciting. I would like to kick off this session by just acknowledging and saying a thank you, first of all, to everyone that's tuning in from Auckland. For anyone that isn't aware, Auckland has done a solid move over the last couple of weeks and has looked after the rest of us by locking down. Hopefully you're all getting to enjoy a little bit more freedom at the moment. And on behalf of someone who's outside of Auckland, lots of love and aroha and respect for looking after us. So thank you. I'd like to shift gear now. This is part of being pregnant. I get quite emotional at random times. This is a wonderful session today that is dedicated to a conversation that started a few weeks ago. Actually, no, maybe it was even a month ago. Serafin and I started having a conversation around some of the things that we were seeing in our workplaces and some of the psychology behind the things that we were seeing. Serafin's joining us today to share her beautiful insights, her perspectives, and a whole different skill set that I think is really valuable for us to get more of into HR, into our leadership, and into the way that we run our businesses. So I'd just like to quickly say kia ora to Serafin. She is, yeah, awesome. There she is. Before we kick into it though, just a couple of housekeeping things. From a safety point of view, if you notice at any point during the call that there is anything inappropriate being shared, please do turn on your mic and let us know. If possible, we will kick the person out. If that's not possible or there's any concern, we'll end the call straight away. So that would be the only scenario. Just a quick safety warning. We want to make sure that we keep our community safe. So that's just a quick thing. In the meantime, if possible, if you could just check that your microphone is on mute, that would be wonderful, just in case chaos starts up at your workplace or your house. With more and more people joining the call, it can get a little bit crazy. So if you can just check that your microphone's on mute, and if you feel comfortable to, we welcome video cameras on in this community because it helps us to connect in with each other. And on that note, if you have got your camera on or not, and you can see the gallery view or switch to gallery view, I'd just love to take a moment just to check in and wave and smile to all the beautiful people that are joining in today. It can be, oh yes. It can be quite easy in these calls to sort of tune out and forget that there are other humans that are in here as well. We make quite a conscious decision not to make this webinar style, which means that one person talks and you can't see anyone else. We like to be able to put on our cameras so that we can connect in as well. So from a Zoom and a safety point of view, we're covered. The other point really is just looking at respect across the group. We are going to have a breakout session during this session. So again, we might have really different ways of viewing things, but making sure that when we have conversations with others, we're being respectful of their views and aware of our language that we're using when we are opposing each other's ideas. So the 4 key words we like to use: safety, respect, and learning. Sorry, that's 3. Safety, respect, and learning. Safety with each other, respect for different ideas, and the goal of today is to learn. All right, I think I've covered off enough. Yes, I'm getting some thumbs up. Everyone's good with those 3 as our sort of pillars for today. Awesome. So what I'd like to do is kick this off with, I do enjoy problem statements. And problem statements, we actually had a quick debate on this before. Do we call them problem statements or opportunity statements? If I'm working with an organization, I often use the word opportunity statement because it seems to land a little bit softer and people are more open to opportunities. The reality is, I believe, if we can acknowledge that they're problems, we can a lot quicker get into solving them. So I'm going to call this a problem statement for today. And this is something that united Serafin and I in our conversations when we looked at some of the problems that we were seeing. So one of the problems that we believe exists at the moment is that people are being asked to leave their personal differences at the door and separate their work and their out of work personas. Now, this was a huge topic for both of us and a real concern that we both have been seeing. And we want to weave into this conversation today around these 2 different personas, some of the psychological impacts that that can have on people, but also what that means around the relationships that we develop at work, who we're allowed to be, how we're allowed to show up. And this, our feeling has been, it's been really amplified with COVID and us working remotely and having our personal lives come into our work lives. So this is the area that we want to jam on and focus on today. The format will be, is I'm going to be opening up, it's going to be quite a Q&A session to sort of pull some of this knowledge and perspectives from Serafin. I've got a number of questions that I've got lined up, but I'd love to welcome questions from you into the chat channel as we're going through. I'll keep an eye on questions that are coming in and weaving them in as well. Later in the session, we'll open up a breakout and give you a chance to work with each other and have a chat about some of the things that are coming up. Cool. All right. So here it is. Problem statement is, we believe that people are being asked to leave their personal differences at the door and separate their work and out of work personas. Now, I'd like to welcome to the Agile HR Aotearoa live speaker series, Serafin. Where are you tuning in from this afternoon?
Kia ora, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me in your space this afternoon. So I am in central Wellington.
Awesome. Current weather check. How's it looking out there?
It's grey.
All right. Go Welly. We're officially in springtime. Now, Serafin, can you give us a quick idea? You're coming in from quite a different lens and perspective in terms of the last 20 years. You've been working as a relational coach, not so specifically on the workplace, but with humans and individuals. Can you just give us a little bit more of an idea around what that includes? What sort of work have you been doing the last 20 years?
Yeah, thank you for asking, and thank you so much for having me today. So my background, I started out working in child and adolescent mental health, and I worked in that field for a long time in New Zealand and Australia. And then I became a relationship therapist. And some of you might have heard of quite a world famous therapist. Her name is Esther Perel. And so I trained with Esther Perel and a guy named Terry Real. And their gig is relationship therapy. And so I trained with them. And from what I learned, I started asking other therapists who are trained with Terry and Esther, do you guys feel like this could be translated to the organization context? And they said, absolutely. So then I went down a rabbit hole of figuring out how might we translate the learnings of relationship therapy in the context of marriage. How might we translate that to the work environment? And to be honest, it's pretty much the same. Anything that's going to be helpful for a marriage or a family is going to be helpful in a workplace.
Whoa, that's such a powerful statement. I'm seeing a couple of heads nodding as you're sharing that as well. So my sense is that other people are recognizing there's a beautiful alignment there. So taking this knowledge and perhaps maybe you can open up some of the learning here around relational intelligence. And this is a term that you've taught to me. And ever since then, I've gone down a rabbit hole of watching almost every single one of Esther Perel's talks. I'll pop into the notes actually one of the links to the talks that you'd sent me. Really cool, wonderful lady who's translating this. Can you share with us a little bit more around relational intelligence and what this is?
Yeah, certainly. So, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but so I was born in the 80s, and there was like a self-help book in the 80s or the 90s. It was in my parents' house, and it would kick around, and it was a book around emotional, like EQ, a book about emotional intelligence. And as a child, I was like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. What's EQ? And I feel like since probably since the 60s, when personal development became like a thing, people have been studying and training in emotional intelligence and lots of leadership training. We send managers on leadership training and leadership coaching, and that covers a lot of emotional intelligence training. So emotional intelligence training covers things like how to manage your emotions. And I say to people that there is a difference between feelings and emotions. So feelings are what you feel inside your body, and emotions are what comes out your face, right? So when you smile, you're showing you're emoting. And when you cry, you're emoting. When you screw up your face with confusion because you don't understand these accounts, that's emoting. You're showing your emotions. And sometimes what we feel on the inside, our feelings might not match what comes out our face. So when we go on leadership training, we talk about emotional intelligence. It's very much about understanding our feelings and then how to respond to the emotions of other people. But some of the things that emotional intelligence training doesn't cover is one of the ideas, or one of the tenets of relational intelligence is about how relationships are actually feedback loops, right? So like if I do something, then you'll respond to that. So emotional intelligence is really about you. It's about the individual and how you manage yourself. Whereas relational intelligence is about how do you manage your relationships with others. And we like to think we're really, really good at relationships. Everyone says, oh, I've got great relationship skills, but relationship skills are incredibly complex and actually really difficult to learn. So coming back to some of the differences between EQ and RQ is that relational intelligence is really about connection. It's about learning about how do we connect to other people, how do we really engage them so that there's trust there. And then the other part of relational intelligence is when trust is damaged, which it always will be because human relationships are so complex, how do we repair that damage? And how, like, knowing what to do when there's been a rift or a breach or a rupture in connection with someone. How do we manage that? How do we manage conflict? So those are two of the main differences.
Yeah, wow.
So I need you to stop me.
Well, there are so many different avenues of what you've just shared that we could go down. One of the ways in which I know you and I have talked about the relational intelligence and how does this connect into the HR function, the leadership function, the organizational function, is around, and you touched on it there when you talked about how do we do this? How do we repair relationships when they're damaged? How do we connect better with people? And is looking at these skill sets. So what, from the experiences that you've had, and I know you're now beginning to work more and more with organizations to help them learn about this, what are the types of skills that you think are really important for people to be learning in the RI space, the relational intelligence space?
Good question. So there's a few things that are helpful to think about. One of the most powerful and compelling things that we can think about when we think about relationships at work is this idea that when people come to work and they have their temperament, their personality, that's one thing, but they also bring with them the experience of every other relationship they've ever had before this moment. So one thing that's not often talked about, and I believe is the final frontier for organizations, is that how people conduct themselves at work in terms of their relationship with their manager, how they feel about taking on board feedback or not, how they feel about approaching a stretch assignment or project, how they feel about taking initiative, or whether they're more backseat, is not just about their personality or temperament, but it's about how they were raised as children and about the relationships that they had growing up. So when we're growing up, we learn about how safe it is to take risks. So like at the moment out there's like a big emphasis on risk taking, and you need to feel safe to take risks. And that's absolutely right. So what we know with children is that children don't take risks unless they feel safe to do so. And it's the same as in an employment context. When you've got employees and you're asking them to take risks, you'll notice some do and some don't. And relational intelligence is about knowing that the people who don't take risks may have not had a good experience in previous relationships, so therefore taking risks feels like too much of a leap for them, whereas other people have had experience of being supported enough to take risks in previous relationships before the relationships they now have with their colleagues. So they're more prepared and feel more comfortable at risk taking. So just coming back to this difference between emotional intelligence and relational intelligence is that I find this fascinating. Like, what do you need to be emotionally intelligent, right? What do you need to demonstrate or be able to have skills in emotional intelligence? Well, the irony is that in order to be emotionally intelligent, we need to be emotionally intelligent, right? So, and this is where relational intelligence comes in. This relational intelligence teaches us the skills we need first in order to be able to develop the skills to be emotionally intelligent. So there's actually a step missing, and that's perhaps what HR professionals would find really interesting, is that some people, like say we go on a leadership training course or a workshop, and we're like teaching coaching skills, right? We assume that everyone in that coaching skills class can learn how to use these coaching skills. Like, why wouldn't they be able to? It's palatable information, it's really easy to read, it's easy to understand, the presenter's really good. But what we don't acknowledge is that every person in that room has a different story and brings a different lens and a different perspective, and they don't see the information you're giving them about coaching as how you see it. They see it through their lens and their experiences of previous coaching experiences they've had in their life to date. And we don't teach like that. We teach the same information to everybody, but everybody needs the information relayed differently.
Yeah. And that concept around everyone has a different story. I love the language you're using there. I think that's a really important lens to put in there. Why do you think then, if we know this, and again I'm seeing nods happen when you made that statement that everyone has a different story, and we're coming into things with all of these relationships and all of these experiences, yet we often continue to offer one option and one way of doing things for developing people. In terms of how might that look different, what sort of things that do you think we could explore or look at when we're looking at acknowledging those differences and recognizing them at work, and realizing that we might need to shift and change some of the things that we do? What sort of ideas or ways in which do you think might be worth looking at?
That's such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked, because it's the opportunity for me to talk about something that I'm like really deeply passionate about. And that is this. So when you go into a meeting, say you go into like a team meeting or an organizational meeting, and you're all there and you're all around the table, and you've got like the manager or the leader speaking, and he says this thing, and he goes, right, now that I've told you that, is everyone all right with that? And there's a few nods, some paper shuffling, and then he says, does anyone have any questions? And some people will put their hands up with their questions, and some people won't. And everyone will walk out of the door of that meeting, and there'll be some chitter chatter in the lunchroom or in the hallway or back at the office, and people will be might feel confused or disgruntled or upset or really happy or really excited, right? So everyone's reaction is different. But what's fascinating about this is one thing we could do differently is to check in with our people once we've said what we've said, right? And you can do this on an individual basis as well. Because when you announce or share something in the context of a group environment, there will always be people who have a response like, I don't understand, I'm confused, I'm not sure what this means for me, I'm not sure what this means for my colleague, I'm not sure what this means for my work. But because of power dynamics, or maybe because that person is a bit shy, maybe they're a bit introverted, maybe they're new to the team, there's like a million reasons why someone's not going to put their hand up and say, I feel confused. And so that person then carries that emotion, those feelings around with them about the work. But here's the kicker. The person who made this statement and said, is everyone okay with that? Does everyone have any questions? They don't mean anything by it. And they think that because nobody had any questions, that therefore means everyone's okay with the messaging. So what needs to happen is there needs to be a feedback loop between what did I say and what did you experience when I said it? Because we don't check back in. We go, and I did it to you today, Cheryl, actually. I did it this morning. I'm like, are you okay with that? Like, what a stupid question. Oh my gosh.
Your fan group is tuning in. I'll pop you on mute while I just bounce a little bit on that, because the part that's coming up that you said right at the beginning there, relationships are actually feedback loops. And that is such a powerful statement. And from what I'm hearing there of what you're sharing is the role of the leader or the person of influence or power. You're saying there's a responsibility perhaps there on that person to make sure the loop happens. And, you know, as the giver of the information, or the one setting down something, that actually the one-way loop, and I know John has sort of touched on it here in the chat channel around, you know, the active listening and being able to, but actually acknowledging that as the person delivering the information, have you closed the loop? And if you can't close that loop, then acknowledging that there might be people now walking out into the workplace with a number of emotions and questions now floating, and they haven't, their loop hasn't been closed.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you so much for articulating that, because yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's great. We have telepathy already. It's brilliant. That's exactly, and it doesn't have to be a leader who's putting out this this message or this information. It can be anybody. You can be talking to your friend in a cafe on the weekend over brunch, and you can say this thing, and they might go away feeling confused or unsure or upset, or like, I'm just making this up. But how we check back in to understand how someone heard information, that's a really big missing piece. And it's so simple to do as well, and it like costs nothing to check back in. But like, one of the things that that we've been looking at this year is like, okay, so how might we do this? And one thing we found out about was that there was like a housing cooperative that had this method of using cards. So like, you have like a blue card and an orange card and a green card, and what you do is like, if the cards, but with their colors, they mean something different, right? So like, one of the cards means like, I'm confused, I don't understand, could you say a little bit more? And you'd flash this card, or like, you might submit it later, and so then the person who made the announcement or shared the news can make sure that that information gets fed back out, because there was obvious confusion. Or the blue card might mean, I'm upset with this plan, but I don't feel comfortable saying it. It's like being at school. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but like, when we were at school, there was like a feedback box in the back of the classroom, and you could like put your questions in. If you're like too whakama or too ashamed to say it to the teacher or ask the question in front of the whole class, you could put it in the ballot box at the back of the classroom. And it's kind of the same thing. There needs to be different mechanisms of people being able to share their thoughts and feelings and experiences that's not in front of a group, because everyone has different risk-taking thresholds.
Yeah, the thresholds, and I'm going to link back into, again, a comment from John that he's shared around, you know, the link in here with psychological safety and those thresholds that you talk about, that in one context, a person's threshold might be one level, perhaps with their peers and their fellow workmates around the coffee machine, in a town hall meeting, or, you know, in a big, large corporate, hey, we've got a big announcement to make, your threshold there might be quite different. And so this sort of, I like to use the word different mechanisms. And so you've shared one there around these colourful cards. You've also talked about leaders actually owning, or leaders or the people sharing the information actually owning that feedback loop and looking at those check-ins. Any other ideas around ways that people might be able to continue developing this relational intelligence with themselves and with their teams? Any sort of experiments or any other things that that have come up, or you've seen that be quite valuable for actually improving the safety that's there and increasing those feedback loops?
Thank you for asking. It's a great question. One thing that I wanted to add that I don't think I think I didn't finish a loop there, and one of the loops I didn't finish was that when we don't, like, the risk of why should we care, right? Like, the risk of not closing a loop and not asking people what they heard when you spoke is that we then, and this can happen to us as individuals with our husbands and wives, and it can happen in the workplace, it can happen anywhere. The risk is that we go away from that conversation thinking that the person or the people agreed with us. Okay? And that's a huge problem, because as a leader, if you think everybody agrees with you and they actually don't, like, you've created a whole bunch of problems for yourself that you don't know about, and then you wonder why you've got like team dynamics happening. So I just wanted to say that's the risk, right?
Yeah, nice. Got a question that's come in from Kat, and it actually is a wonderful. I'm seeing the loop theme come up in everything that I do now. And actually, just as one quick point, not sure if you're aware you even did it then, Serafin. You actually, one of the mechanisms you used there was, you said, I didn't finish a loop there. And I wonder if that's even quite a powerful statement for people to use, to acknowledge times when we don't actually complete the loop, but maybe we meant to, and making it safe for someone else to let us know when, hey, you haven't actually completed the loop there. I'm still sitting over here trying to figure out that. And for a leader to actually acknowledge and go like, I'm trying to connect the loops, I'm going to miss it sometimes. Can you let me know if I don't actually complete that? So thank you for using one of the techniques, which is actually acknowledging that stuff as well. But this comment here from Kat around, you know, linking this into the concept around bringing our whole selves to work. And obviously we started with the problem statement around we're expected to come in as a work person and a not work person. And I love both Serafin and I both put on blazers today because we thought it might be quite significant to talk about our out of work person and then actually our in work version, and this crazy thing that happens when we put on a different persona. So in line with that, how can we use relational intelligence to actually support this concept around people being able to bring their whole self to work?
I thank you, Kat, for raising the question again, because it was one of Cheryl's brilliant questions, and I failed to answer it. So thanks, Kat, for like bringing it to our attention again and bringing it back online. The whole thing of like bringing our whole selves to work. It's, as a therapist, I find this really fascinating because even if we don't, no matter how much we try and say everyone embrace this idea of like bringing our whole self to work, or like all of us, which I think is, you know, everyone's doing it anyway because everyone's having everyone's working from home and having their meetings in front of their rambunctious children and those sorts of things. So say that we allow everybody to bring all of themselves to work and we really embrace that, and whatever that looks like, you are still going to get people who feel really uncomfortable about that, because people like to, it's around safety, right? Like even if you invite people to bring all of themselves to work and you say, look, we're a great culture here, we're fully supportive of work-life balance. If you want to bring your kids to work, or you want to bring your wife to work, or you want to bring your dog to work, like we just want, and if you want to wear your gym clothes to work, like we fully embrace all of you, like just feel free to bring all of yourself to work. There are still people who wouldn't actually embrace that, and that comes back to what I was saying before about how everyone has different experiences growing up of relationship and risk. So somebody might not want to wear their spandex to work because for them that feels too risky, because maybe people just have different appetites around what they feel safe about disclosing and what they don't. Can you riff off that, Cheryl? Because I've got distracted and I've changed my board into a bush somewhere and gotten lost. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, we keep talking about this concept of, you know, these two personas, and I also wanted to get your thoughts on, from a psychological standpoint in our community, and given the level of stress that people are carrying at the moment and things that are out of their circumstances with COVID and changes, what do you think is the impact if we don't address this problem of two people, of we're supposed to be two people and we're showing up and there's the awkwardness someone mentioned in here around, your dog barking in the background of a Zoom call might be okay, but it wouldn't be okay. There's these real differences, and we know that these are taxing on people. What is the impact if we don't do anything about this, if we leave this as it is?
If we leave things as they are, people will continue to feel stressed. They will continue to go to their GPs and ask for antidepressants and anti-anxiety tablets. They will continue to self-medicate with food, with exercise, with more work, with alcohol. People are really, really stressed, and I think like organizations are doing more and more about focusing on the individual, like doing things like allowing people to have flexi time and saying, like, here's some sessions for going to see a counselor. How can we support you? But where organizations could do things differently is actually use the organization itself as a protective factor. Like, what happens if you use work to be a way to relieve your stress rather than be a cause of stress? Like, why not make work? So at the moment, like everyone knows, we have various mental health crises. But what if people could go to work to feel better? What if work became a place of sanctuary? Because, for lots of people, it is, because they find their work really intellectually stimulating, or they find their work really creative, or it's a good way to get away from your family. There's lots of great things about work, and I think we could exploit that even further and make work, like, what if it was more like a sports team? Like, everyone loves to go and hang out with their sports team. We could make it more like that. Like, why don't we play sports at work? There's lots of things that organizations could do that focuses more on the relationships between people and cultivating friendships with people at work. So one thing we know about men's mental health is that men don't ask for help, right? They have to get to a pretty bad space before they'll reach out for help. So workplaces could focus on relational activities and relational infrastructure so that men had more close relationships with their colleagues at work, and that becomes then people not only are more invested in the work, so the organization becomes more productive and more profitable, but people become happier because they've got their friends at work. So one thing we can do is focus more on making people not like great teams, but actually make them great friends.
I love that statement. What if people could go to work to feel better? That is a really powerful vision. And I'd love to link that in as well into the concept around employee experience. And, we've got a number of people tuned in that are HR professionals, leaders, recognizing that, hey, I know if my people are having a good experience at work, they're going to feel happier. But actually this next level, what if we actually went to work to feel better and got a lot of enjoyment out of that as well, is huge. So I actually, if it's all right with you, Serafin, I feel like we're at a nice point to possibly pause and open up some breakout rooms, because if you're anything like me, there's all sorts of thoughts and ideas that are landing in right now, and you might be wanting to have a chat to a few other people about them. So what we're going to do is open up the breakout rooms. This is completely optional. You don't have to join a breakout room if you don't feel like it. But if you would like to have a chat to a few other people about some of these concepts, I'm going to throw you, on this one of, what if people could go to work to feel better? That might be an interesting one to jam on. But we'll open up the rooms for 5 minutes. that will probably go quite quickly. I'll give you a 1-minute warning, which will say you can come on back to the room. Now we've got 31 people. I'm going to split it by, we'll say 7 rooms. That should put about 3 people or so. Yeah, we'll go with that. If you end up in a weird space and there's no one else in the room, just come back into the main room and I'll pop you into one of the rooms. That can sometimes happen when we do it. So we're going to open up the breakout rooms if you want to join in. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay in this main session. We'll hold 5 minutes for you to jam on some of the topics that we've covered off already today. So rooms are opening. Head on through if you would like to catch up with some other people. Awesome. Welcome back, everyone.
That was too.
That was what? That was too short?
Yeah, it was too short.
Yeah, I know. And I it's one of those challenges with such a big topic like this, right? There is so much you want to dive into. Hopefully, again, you know, note the people that are in this community. I think with most people, there's a comfort level in terms of finding each other on LinkedIn if you want to follow up any of these conversations as well. It certainly is a good conversation, and we've got 12 more minutes left to go. So what I want to do is I've got a question I'm going to ask for Serafin, just based on one that came through the channel a bit earlier. And while she's doing that, if any questions came up in your group that you'd like to get into the last 5 minutes, I can't promise we'll get all the questions answered today, but if any particular questions came up that you'd really like to ask Serafin while we've got her for another 5, feel free to pop that into the chat channel. 2 points, Serafin, before we go into our last 5 minutes. One was John had made a great point earlier around the Agile side of this. This is probably where my passion comes in, and the concept around creating working agreements with teams. This is something I would say is it can be a challenging experience to create them, but creating social contracts and ways in which the teams acknowledge and create safety within a team, sometimes not always requiring the leader to be the one that drives it. The teams can do that as well. So I just wanted to sort of share that in as a thought. When we're looking at agility of our people, how might we do that? There are some fantastic exercises and tools to facilitate the creation of a social contract or a working agreement within a team to actually build a lot of that psychological safety. The question that's come in here that I'm really curious on your thoughts is there a difference between relational intelligence and social intelligence?
So the person who asked, Tanya, would you feel okay to talk about what your understanding of social intelligence is? Just because I don't know what social intelligence is, so therefore I don't feel like I can respond to that elegantly.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So a lot of what you're talking about in relational intelligence is very much social intelligence. So, you know, emotional intelligence is your awareness of your feeling state and your ability to manage your own emotion. Social intelligence is then to be able to read other people, their emotional responses, and adapt your response in relationship to that. So that becomes about your EQ, and then SQ is your ability to then change your way of communicating with others intelligently, so it includes them in the picture, so it becomes a two-way thing. That's social intelligence. So it sounds very similar.
Yeah, so I would say that so the relational intelligence is just that you are so relational intelligence would be combining emotional intelligence and social intelligence, but it's also aware of that. So we make the other. So relationships are feedback loops, right? And they're dynamic. So relational intelligence is being aware of the dynamic that's between you and another person, and the dynamic is about what's not said. Yeah.
Well,
but it's part of it. Yeah.
the dynamic is what's not said.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely segue into kind of the conversation around, you were saying earlier around You know, it's not that hard to say to someone, like, I'm just checking in, did you understand what I shared then? What would you say if people did find that hard? Because certainly for some of our leaders, and I know there'll be a number of HR people and people that support leaders and organizations on this call, how do you support someone when that is actually quite a hard thing? Because that might be quite vulnerable for them to actually, you know, it's a lot easier to go, here is my information, got it, good, great, I'm going to carry on with what I'm doing. It can be quite vulnerable to actually say, did you understand? And did that make sense? And, you know, do you have any kind of ideas around how you would kind of go about that with a leader or supporting someone that does find that uncomfortable?
Yeah, great question. And it kind of dovetails to what Tanya was just saying about social intelligence. And so, like, one of the things that I do within my my practice is I call it the Airbnb of therapy, right? So, like, at the end of a therapy session or a coaching session, my client, whether it's an organization or an individual or a couple or a family, they've got to review me, right? They review me like you review something on Google, or you review your Airbnb accommodation. They give me like a tick, or give me a grade out of 10 on, did I meet their needs? Did I meet the goals? Did they get to talk about what they needed to talk about? And so one of the ways we can do that if we're wanting to build our relationship with someone is always kind of at the end of any kind of meeting or session or time that we've spent with them, we can check back in with them and like ask them to review us, like, how did we go? And like, I agree with you, some people for different reasons, or might like different, like, there's depending on the power dynamic or the power differential, because power is always present, right? It's always there, we can't get rid of it. So let's like embrace it and do something creative with it. Is you could like send them an email that's anonymous, so that the feedback that they're giving you about what you've just said, or their reflections or how they're feeling, it doesn't out them. They can feel safe knowing that they're giving feedback and it's in a written form, and other people will be okay to say it in person. So it's just like always making sure there's multiple ways to give feedback or give a sense of one's experience, but just different platforms to do that.
Beautiful. Different platforms, different opportunities, and you actually use the word different mechanisms. And I love that because you know, again, much in with the concepts of agile and experimentation, there is not any one way in which you're going to be able to beautifully craft the best feedback loops in your relationships. You're going to have to experiment with it, right? And try different mechanisms and see how they work. Yeah, cool. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm gonna possibly just open this up a little bit. It's a great question from Dan, and we'll maybe kind of hold a minute or two for a response on this one, because I know this is a big one, but it is a good one. So Dan said, in couples, usually both partners value having equal status. We're coming back into this power thing again. In organizations, relationships often span tiers in a hierarchy where there is clear power imbalance. How does that affect the applicability of couples therapy to relationships and organizations? This might be a whole nother Agile HR talk in itself.
But I love that we're getting this amazing question at the end of the session. So Dan, this is what I wanted today to be about. Cheryl had to rein me in because I was all over the place with all the things I wanted to chat to you guys about and get your ideas on. Can I just say, like, it feels really uncomfortable for me how much I've talked, and that hasn't been a collaborative space today, so apologies for that. But like, this is the most amazing question. So Dan has asked, in couples, usually both partners value having equal status. In organizations, relationships often span tiers in a hierarchy where there's a clear power imbalance. What does this have to do with, like, couples have equal power, so what does this have to do with organizations? Like, what a brilliant question. So what I would say to that is that no, couples don't have equal power status. There's always a power differential in place. And how to start on this question? So in organizations, we want to be closer to one another, because when we're not close to one another, when we have workplace dramas, when we have a toxic person in the workplace, or we have an annoying colleague, or our boss is mean to us, right? These things feel really awful. And we lose sleep, and we stress, and we fret, and we talk to our friends, and we talk to our GP, and it feels uncomfortable, and we wish it wasn't there. So we can't get rid of these uncomfortable relational experiences in the workplace. So what to do? So the research and science on couples relationships is really interesting to apply to the workplace, because we know that we can't get rid of power, so then we're going to have to work with it. So couples therapy research and relational science can actually teach organizations how to have better relationships because there's power present. Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm watching Dan's eyebrows have got to a new level of height. That feels like a beautiful, powerful way to sort of end this call, in terms of absorbing the fact that this is not about trying to remove those power imbalances or remove bad relationships, but acknowledge what is and look at how we can actually support better skills to be able to handle them.
Exactly. Nicely said, Cheryl. Thank you.
That's all I got for Friday. Serafin, thank you so much. I always love our conversations. This was a bit of a random one for us to go, how are we going to go roll this? And like Serafin said, we talked about having kind of bigger sessions and everyone collaborating, but you just have so much great insights on it. I think we made the right call in allowing you to just share with us today. I know I've taken a lot of notes. Thank you for your time. I know you haven't felt 100% this week, so this call almost didn't go ahead. So thank you for pushing through, being present and teaching us today. It's been incredible. So thank you to our whole community for being here today. I would have loved to have heard what was going on in some of those breakout rooms. I'm sure there were some good chats. Just as a heads up, the Agile HR Aotearoa speaker series won't be happening next month, because I have something else I have to focus on next month. I'm due in 2 weeks, and so I'm going to hold some space next month for a different project that I'm working on. But I am actually going to have booked in for November. I get a lot of great energy from these sessions, and so I've already put in the Event Meetup app a placeholder for November. I'll have a little think about what that topic might be. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share, or a speaker that you think might be interested, send them through. I'd love to hear from them. So we're just going to take a pause for a month, and then we'll reignite back up again in November. I may have a +1 joining the future calls as well. It's so wonderful to have you all here. I've nailed it today. We're at 2 o'clock and we're done. Yes, it's probably my first time I've actually managed to keep it within the hour. Before you leave today, please give us a wave and a goodbye. It's so nice to see you all, and thank you for being here.